Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into what I can only describe as an absolute earthquake in the global automotive industry. In 2026, China's auto industry crossed a threshold that honestly no one saw coming this fast, and it is fundamentally reshaping where the cars of tomorrow are coming from. But what looks like an unstoppable global conquest on the surface, well, it's actually hiding a really complex and incredibly tense reality back home. 1,037,000. In June 2026, for the very first time in history, a single country exported over 1 million cars in just one single month. Over the first half of the year alone, cumulative exports hit over 5 million vehicles. To put that into perspective, that is a massive 65.3% jump compared to the exact same period just a year earlier. It's a historic, unprecedented milestone that basically blew past even the absolute most optimistic industry forecasts. Okay, let's dive into this, because this is where the story gets really fascinating. This massive statistical triumph, it's actually masking a severe domestic crisis. It's a classic paradox. While these export numbers look like a huge victory lap for Chinese manufacturers, this record reflects weakness just as much as it reflects strength. To figure out why millions of cars are suddenly flooding the global market, we really have to understand what's happening inside China's own borders. All right, Section 1, the domestic pressure valve. Let's look at the domestic market squeeze. So the contrast you're looking at here is literally the key to this entire phenomenon. On one side, bam, you've got that booming 65.3% export growth. But wait, look at the domestic reality. Sales in China have fallen for 9 consecutive months. The home market is locked in this brutal price war. And at the exact same time, the government has been pulling back on EV subsidies. Automakers are rapidly losing buyers at home. So going global isn't just a fun expansion strategy anymore. For a lot of these companies, it has become a desperate, absolutely crucial necessity for survival. The situation is perfectly summed up by this industry sentiment. Exports have effectively become the industry's pressure valve for excess production capacity. Think about it. These manufacturers have massive factories built to churn out millions of cars. When local demand dries up, you can't just hit pause on a gigantic factory without hemorrhaging cash. You've got to keep the production lines running. And right now, the only way to do that is to aggressively pump those excess vehicles overseas. Moving on to Section 2, mapping the global expansion. So, where on earth are all these cars actually going? And this brilliantly illustrates the surprising new geography of Chinese auto exports. You might be thinking, oh, they're all heading straight to Western Europe or the US, right? Actually, no way. In the first couple months of 2026, Russia was the largest single market, taking in over 108,000 vehicles. Right on its heels is the UAE, which is acting as this massive logistics hub and premium market for the Middle East. And then there's Brazil, with a booming demand for budget-friendly new energy vehicles, or NEVs. It's the emerging markets that are absolutely driving this surge. But let's zoom in on Russia for just a second, because there's a wild paradox hiding here too. Russia is China's top export destination, right? Yet, the actual market share of imported Chinese brands inside Russia shrank. It went from almost 52% in early 2025 down to just 40% in early 2026. How does a country buy more Chinese cars than anyone else, but the Chinese market share drops that significantly? Well, the answer comes down to localization and regulation. Chinese manufacturers aren't retreating from Russia, they're digging in. Brands like Haval have set up their own assembly plants right inside Russia, like their massive facility in Tula. Plus, a lot of these vehicles are being sold under localized Russian brand names now, so they literally don't count as Chinese imports in the data anymore. Add to that a super strict new export rule from January 2026 that stopped new cars from being shipped abroad disguised as used cars, and the numbers on paper completely transform. All right, Section 3, the brand battlefield. Let's look at the heavy hitters driving these massive volumes. There is honestly no better poster child for this whole situation than BYD. In the first half of 2026, BYD was the undisputed king in China, selling around 795,000 units domestically. But you have to look closely at that year-over-year figure. That represents a catastrophic 45.9% drop in domestic sales. Despite being number one at home, they are bleeding sales in China because of those fierce price wars. That massive drop is exactly why an industry titan like BYD is being forced to pivot so hard toward international markets just to make up the difference. And while there are dozens and dozens of auto brands in China, this export boom is insanely top-heavy. Just 4 giants, Haval, Chery, Geely, and BYD account for a whopping 70% of all overseas shipments. The remaining 30% is just fought over by the rest of the industry. The big 4 are effectively carrying the weight of the entire country's export push on their shoulders. But they aren't all using the exact same playbook to win overseas. They've got very distinct tactics. Chery, for instance, is making a massive, direct push into Europe, posting an unbelievable 322% growth rate there in the spring of 2026 alone. Geely, on the other hand, they're playing the long game with localization, setting up joint production in Malaysia with Proton, in Belarus with Belgi, and even investing in a Brazilian plant alongside Renault. They are really putting roots down in the markets they want to conquer. Which brings us to Section 4, pushing back, the roadblocks and tariffs they're facing globally. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how a very specific type of technology became a giant geopolitical loophole. You're probably familiar with PHEVs, or plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, which use both an electric motor and a traditional gas engine. So why are we defining this right now? Because in 2026, PHEVs became the absolute favorite tool for Chinese automakers trying to break into Europe. This timeline shows you exactly how this global game of regulatory whack-a-mole is playing out. Back in 2024, the European Union slapped anti-subsidy tariffs on pure electric vehicles coming from China. So what did the Chinese brands do? Early 2026 rolls around, and they aggressively shift their export mix toward PHEVs. Why? Because those plug-in hybrids fell completely outside the EU's pure EV tariffs. By mid-2026, new energy vehicles made up half of all China's monthly exports, largely riding this clever hybrid wave. But the EU caught on fast. By mid-2026, they were already preparing to extend those tariffs to cover PHEVs as well, trying to slam that loophole shut for good. There's even talk of a minimum export price agreement being negotiated to try and calm this incredibly volatile trade environment down. Finally, Section 5, the road ahead. Let's look at the future outlook. So the crucial point is this jaw-dropping forecast number, 10 million. If the blistering pace of the first half of 2026 holds steady, analysts are forecasting that full-year exports could completely shatter all previous estimates and easily top 10 million units. Keep in mind, the official auto association in China originally predicted a conservative 7.4 million for the year. 10 million would absolutely dwarf the 8.3 million vehicles exported in 2025. It is a scale of global automotive movement that we have literally never witnessed before. But all of this leads us to the ultimate million-dollar question we have to ask. Can an export boom actually survive a domestic bust? What we are watching right now is an industry sprinting across the globe because the floor is quite literally falling out from beneath it at home. With the EU fighting back with tariffs and domestic demand still shrinking, this strategy is walking an incredibly thin line. It's a fascinating, high-stakes balancing act that is going to define the future of the automotive world. We hope this explainer helped you grasp the incredible mechanics hiding behind the headlines. Keep a close eye on those domestic sales numbers in China, because they might just be the most important export indicator of all.